Welcome to Independence for Wales. It's the 1st of December 2012, and this article is about Bloomberg's suit against the ECB. The title of the article is the EU court chooses to bury the truth about Greek debt and the ECB's involvement. Bloomberg have been unsuccessful in their attempt to get the ECB to disclose information that will potentially expose the ECB's knowledge of the Greek government's fraudulent reporting of its finances, and this is relating to both Greece's entry into the euro and its time in the euro until 2008. So why should Greek taxpayers care about this failure, if you like, of this suit that was brought by Bloomberg? Well, basically because the Greek people are picking up the bill for this debt that was accumulated under false pretenses. The Greek taxpayer is paying for debts that were made through loans that were done potentially illegally. Okay, so the first problem is that the Greek government more than likely joined the euro with fraudulent figures. So this is the article's on the side. I've linked to the information that I'm talking about here if you want to get the background. So yeah, so Greece more than likely joined the euro with fraudulent figures that were in part put together by Goldman Sachs. These figures painted a picture that led investors to believe the finances of the Greek government were in much better position than was the reality. The Greek central bank governor during this period, Papademos, subsequently went to work for the ECB when Greece joined the euro. And basically these figures that were put together by Goldman Sachs not only allowed Greece to enter the euro but also to borrow at very low borrowing costs, the same borrowing costs as Germany. So that's the part one of the case that could potentially invalidate the explosion in the Greek government debt. But the second point, and this is more specifically of where Bloomberg's lawsuit came in, the finances of the Greek government were manipulated from the point of entry, not only up until the point of entry to get Greece in, but the manipulation could have Bloomberg is alleging the fraudulent reporting of the Greek government's finances continued from 2000 when Greece joined the euro until 2008 when the government's finances blew up. Bloomberg say they have received information that leads them to believe that the ECB was aware of the fraudulent reporting of the Greek government's finances, but they did nothing to expose it. The non-reporting by the ECB further inflamed Greece's problems by allowing the Greek government to ramp up its debt from its entry into the euro until 2008. Had the ECB exposed the fraudulent accounting of the Greek government's finances, the Greek government would never have been able to get into so much debt. Unfortunately for the world, and especially Europeans and specifically taxpayers, Greek taxpayers, the EU General Court has decided that the ECB should be able to decide what information is suitable for release to the public and what information is in the public's interest and what is not. Obviously Bloomberg are very critical of this decision. In short, the EU has given the ECB immunity from whatever prosecution might occur should the ECB be exposed as knowingly covering up the reality of the Greek government's finances from the people of Europe, investors, the Greek people and the rest of the world. But it goes deeper. It goes deeper than that. Not only would the fraudulent figures have allowed the Greek government to increase its debt massively, the ECB would also have been directly involved in increasing the Greek debt itself. Not only would the ECB have allowed investors to get the wrong idea about the sustainability of the Greek government's debt, the ECB itself has profited from the false information that it has allowed into the public domain. Much of the Greek debt accumulated since Greece's entry into the euro has been financed by the ECB through its monetization of bonds issued by the Greek government. So even though it's possible that, or Bloomberg is alleging that ECB knew the finances of the Greek government was being falsely reported, they also actively partook in the financing of it themselves, even though they knew that the Greek government could not service its debt. So it's almost, well, if what Bloomberg is saying, the ECB has deliberately lent money to Greece that it knew it wouldn't get back, which obviously brings up a lot of questions. I've also put a video on the article, which basically just gives a quick breakdown of how the Greek government financed this debt, and basically how European governments finance their debt, with regards to how they work with the ECB, so you can get an idea of how the ECB monetized this debt that arguably it knew was going to go bad at some point. And then the article sums up, assuming Bloomberg is correct and that the ECB suppressed the truth about the Greek government's finances from prior to, well, not prior, but since it joined with the euro, the effects are as follows. Number one, the debt load on Greek taxpayers has increased massively. The Greek government has accumulated massive debts through the use of fraudulent figures. The ECB has profited massively through loans made to the Greek government until now. And for the results of all this is will inevitably lead to a massive confiscation of Greek assets, not only government assets but also potentially private assets to service this debt as collateral. So I finished. The last line of the article is, in short, Greece's entry in the euro has been a textbook example of fraudulent conveyance. And I'll put a link to what exactly is fraudulent conveyance, but I will just do. I'll just give a brief rundown. It goes like this: if a farmer, for example, this is where the idea of fraudulent conveyance came from. If a farmer goes to a bank and wants a loan for the year for whatever reason, and the bank looks at the loan, it sees that what the farmer is asking for is not sustainable. They don't believe it is a good plan what the farmer has. The bank does not believe that the use that the farmer wants. The bank does not believe that the money that the farmer wants is going to be put to good use or is a wise investment. Basically, the bank does not agree with the loan and what it will be used for, and that it will be a successful use of the money. But the bank knows that the farmer has a lot of land here. The farmer has assets, so the bank lends the farmer the money, not because they believe the farmer will pay them back, but because they know that they can seize the farmer's assets. And it goes. There's also another flavour to that. The bank it cannot do that, and or it can lend the money to the farmer, but then ask for the money back prior to the date that the loan is supposed to be paid back. So the bank lends money to the farmer for a period of a year, but instead of giving the farmer a year to pay it back, the bank asks for the money back in 6 months, for example, before the farmer has had a chance to harvest his crop. So he's got no money. So the bank classes that as the farmer defaulting on his loan, so they seize the assets that way. Either way, it's fraudulent conveyance. Basically, it comes down to the bank knowing that they're not going to get the loan repaid, but they make the loan anyway, not because they think there's a chance of getting the money back, but because they make the loan because they want to seize the farmer's assets. And this, I believe, what's happened with Greece is a textbook example. The ECB, the private banks who have been who have been taking the government bonds know, because they have had access to this fraudulent accounting, they know that the Greek government, there's no way that it can service the loans that it's being issued with. Now, whether the politicians knew the figures were cooked, or whether it was just something between the private banks and the central banks and your investment banks like Goldman Sachs, I don't know. But whatever the case may be, is that the Bloomberg figures this lawsuit from Bloomberg could potentially have exposed the banks as making loans to Greece and the conditions that they themselves knew were fraudulent. So that opens up a Pandora's box, and this is probably why the EU General Court, as it's called, has ruled against Bloomberg, because if it was exposed that the ECB and the private banks knew that the Greek government's finances were fraudulent, that would show that they were making loans to the Greek government that they knew that were not going to be able to be paid back by the Greek government. So obviously the Greek banks and the international banks and the ECB knew that these loans were not going to be paid back. So they obviously did not do this on purpose. They obviously did not do this to lose money. So the only other logic behind their loans to the Greek government is the fraudulent conveyance aspect. They loaned money to Greece not because they thought Greece was going to pay the loans back with interest, but they did it as a way to get access to seize assets in Greece, whether it was government assets or private assets. And this is what we see happening today in Greece. Now, if they were doing it to seize government assets, then arguably they would have done it. The Greek government would have defaulted by now. But they continue. The ECB, basically the same people that lent the money in the first place, are continuing to lend money to the Greek government. They're continuing to keep the government afloat so it does not default on its obligations. And what we have happening is the assets of the private sector in Greece are being seized. So the only the entity that is still working, if you like, and I use that in the loosest possible terms, is the Greek government, but its only function being to collect taxes. That is the only function that is still, if you like, working for the Greek government. So you could argue that the ECB and the international banks are using the Greek government solely as a tax collector, and when the taxes are no longer able to be paid by the Greek people, then you're going to see the massive wholesale stripping of private assets in the Greek economy. And say, going back to the title of the article and the purpose of the article, Bloomberg are alleging that the ECB and the international banks potentially knew that they weren't going to get the money back from the Greek government, and they weren't going to get repaid for the loans they were making. And today we have the Greek government being stopped from defaulting by the ECB. So the only logical answer I have with regards to the actions of the ECB and the international banks lending Greece the money was because their long-term goal was to actually seize private assets of the Greek people. That is the only logical explanation for the international banks and for the ECB to be lending money to someone, a party, i.e. the Greek government, that they knew they could not pay back, that they knew could not pay them back. So the only way they could be reimbursed for the loans they made is by the seizure of the assets in Greece, private or public. And this is what we see happening in Greece today. Massive tax increases, inevitable defaults on taxes by the Greek people, and the inevitable consequences of that will be the seizure of private assets by the international banks and the banks inside Greece that have made these loans. And that is textbook example of fraudulent conveyance. I encourage you to have a look on Wikipedia under fraudulent conveyance. Have a look on the Independence for Wales podcast. I've done an article on fraudulent conveyance a few months ago where I linked to a Max Kaiser video on Russia Today, where he was interviewing Mike Hudson, I think is the gentleman's name, and he outlines fraudulent conveyance. And fraudulent conveyance basically is can absolve the Greek government of its obligations for these debts. If the loans are made illegally, then they are illegal and they do not have to be paid back. And this is the article. I mean, I'm tempted to go into talking about like abuse of the power of attorney, because it's not okay. Some people might say, well, the Greek government lend it, they've got to pay it back. But okay, the Greek government can borrow the money, but they're not the ones that have to pay it back. If you like, the government have got the power of attorney for the people. If you have a situation where the government can be completely reckless, lie about its figures, and expect the taxpayer to pick up the tab, then we're talking about an abuse of the government abusing its power, well, abusing its tax-raising powers in order to serve international banks. You could argue that the Greek government is now a tool of the ECB and of the international banks as a way of seizing private assets. If an international bank, the ECB, wants to seize large swathes of land or assets in a country, they simply have to cook the books of the government, lend the government money, more money than they can ever hope to pay back, let the government get into trouble, and then force the government to have massive tax increases, which will inevitably lead to private individuals defaulting on their tax obligations, and then this would legally then allow the banks to seize assets through illegal means. You have an illegal process by which you get to the legal stage of seizure of assets. I'm not sure if I'm clear in my argument here. But if I can sum it up in the best way I can, what it appears to me is that you have private banks, large international banks, the ECB, exploiting the power that the government has to seize people's assets, and it is using that, and it is exploiting that function by allowing the government to get into debt that it can't service, as a step towards massive tax increases that are clearly completely unrealistic, and then from that it leads to the seizure of assets that way. Like I said, I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear, but by all means, leave a comment on below this video, leave a comment on my blog. If you can explain it better, or if you want to ask me questions about what I mean, feel free. I mean, let's have a conversation about this. Please vote on the video, let me know what you think, and thank you for watching. This is Richard, Independence for Wales. Thanks again.